Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to IPDay's Webinar Wednesday. I'm June Rawl. Today's webinar, A New TABE for a New Era. Today we're going to dig into the TABE 11 and 12 tests. We're going to review some diagnostic data. We're going to walk you through a comparison of NRS descriptors to sample questions on the TABE test. Our hope today is that we can answer your questions and address the expectations and the rigor of the test itself. We're going to look at the new diagnostic reports like updates to the individual profile reports and a lot more. Today's facilitator is Mike Johnson. We are so thrilled to have Mike on the call with us. Mike is the National Director for DRC, the Data Recognition Corporation. We also have Christine Kirk online with us to answer some questions along with the Florida Department of Education staff. Lisa Williams will be on the call with us too, and she will be able to address questions that you might have throughout the webinar. But before I turn it over to Mike, I would like to remind you to submit your questions via the Q&A tab. And remember that your microphones are muted. This webinar, like all IPDay webinars, are recorded and they are archived on the IPDay website. The PowerPoint for this webinar is already loaded on the IPDay website as well. Well, at this point, I know a lot of you are really interested in this webinar, and I wanted to thank Mike for taking the time to share this information with us. So on behalf of all of us here in Florida, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you and we can start the webinar.
Thank you, June, and thank you everybody for joining us today. As June mentioned, we'll go through some of the new updates for TABE. We'll also review some of the information into the changes to 11 and 12, and I'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. You should see the slides change. As we've discussed in some previous webinars, if you attended, the big focus for TABE 11 and 12 is the change related to the National College and Career Readiness Standards. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward, but we'll also talk about the length of the test. I know programs have discovered some changes related to the length. One of those changes specifically that there is just one version of TABE 11 and 12. There is no longer a survey or short version and a complete battery a long version. There's just TABE 11 and 12 at one length, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. As well as the math, a little bit of a change from TABE 9 and 10, that math becomes one test, no longer a separate computation test and a separate applied math test, but one math test that does have two parts in most cases, and we'll talk about those parts in an upcoming slide. But those parts are much more focused on applied skills. Not that computation goes away completely, but even when there is computation being covered under the new standards, it's how do you apply those computation skills. We have also updated the locator to include 4 additional questions to improve the placement. A little bit later, we'll talk about some changes we have in place for the locator, for the time on the locator, that will also help the placement process for the locator exam as well. And then another content-related change for TABE is in TABE 9 and 10, there are 3 additional tests at the end of the test booklets in the paper and pencil world: the language mechanics, the spelling, and the vocabulary tests. Under the new College and Career Readiness Standards, some of those competencies or standards get rolled into the language test. So for the programs that do language, and I know many do reading and math, but some do language as well, we'll see some of the changes related to the language test incorporating those areas. And last, I will cover some correlation studies that we are undertaking to correlate TABE 11 and 12 to high school equivalency tests, certainly to TASC, our high school equivalency test, but to also to the other high school equivalency tests that are available nationwide. Just as a review of what is available for TABE 11 and 12, very similar to TABE 9 and 10, there is the locator, as I mentioned, the 2 alternate forms, 11 and 12. There still is 5 levels of content available. So level L is still available. That's the literacy level. Then E, M, D, and A, covering all 6 levels of the NRS approval. DRC is very proud to be the only assessment to be approved by the U.S. Department of Education to cover all 6 levels of the educational functional levels in 3 content areas, covering all 3, reading, math, and language, to allow programs and students the most opportunity to show growth. And those federal approvals have no conditions related to those approvals. There's full 7-year approval related to all content areas. For paper testing, still having the reusable test booklets as we have in 9 and 10. You can scan your answer sheets. You can still use the Scories answer sheets, and you can hand score your answer sheets. We will talk about hand scoring. It does become a little bit more labor intensive because of the types of questions that are being used, and we'll look at that a little bit later. And also TABE Online, the computer-based testing platform, is exactly the same as TABE 9 and 10. So if you're using TABE Online today, it's exactly the same platform, exactly the same process of setting up test sessions. The only thing that's different is that you would schedule a TABE 11 or 12 test instead of scheduling a 9 or a 10 test. So once you know how to use Insight, you already know how to use the computer-based platform. One of the biggest changes, as June kind of mentioned in her introduction, was the change to the NRS descriptors. Those NRS descriptors on the screen I have is a sample of the NRS descriptor related to Math Level 1. This Math Level 1 descriptor is broken out into 2 parts. The blue section on the top is the old descriptor, what TABE 9 and 10 was aligned to. And the orange box is the new descriptor that TABE 11 and 12 needs to align to receive the federal approval going forward. You can obviously see there's a big difference. The old descriptor is 1 sentence. The new descriptor is 5 paragraphs long. Paragraph number 3 under the new section is algebraic thinking. And it says, students prepared to exit this level understand and apply the properties of operation to addition, subtraction, problems, which is kind of saying the same thing as that first sentence in the blue box where it says an individual has little or no recognition of numbers or simple counting skills and may only have minimal skills such as the ability to add or subtract single-digit numbers. So they do cover the same area, but the new descriptor adds much more information, much more expectation for those students. This is what TABE Level E and Level M need to have their questions then directed towards. And I've highlighted in red some of the key words. We see create composite shapes, organize, represent, and interpret, analyze and compare, understand and apply, use their understanding, explain their reasoning, recognize errors. All these more rigorous expectations and skills that are required at level 1 of math. These are the same expectations at all 6 levels of math, and the same for reading and language as well. The descriptors and the words used to describe each of the functional levels are just as long, 5 to 6 paragraphs for each of the 6 levels for reading, math, and language. This is what really drives the development for TABE 11 and 12, looking at these descriptors, what is required for TABE to get the federal approval. And this is kind of where the separation happens between high school equivalency and federally approved assessments for accountability. High school equivalency tests, just like TABE, align to college and career readiness standards. The difference is that high school equivalency tests do not have any federal oversight to this level of these descriptors. There's no Department of Education review of high school equivalency tests. There's no additional descriptors. So there may be changes. Some people refer to TABE being updated so that it aligns to the GED. And that's technically incorrect. TABE was updated because the NRS updated their descriptors for the expectations of what employers and educators were looking for students entering the workforce in post-secondary programs. there was not an expectation that the NRS was updated to align to the GED. Now, they're certainly very closely tied to each other, but there was no consultation between high school equivalency and the descriptors that were drafted. Looking at the process for TABE, and the process of TABE has not changed. We see students coming in the left-hand corner, the top corner. They enter your program. We very strongly encourage them to take the locator test. From the locator test, they go ahead and get placed into a pretest. After the pretest, they'll go through your instructional programs. Once the instructional programs are complete, the students will take a post-test to show growth. After that growth, they may exit your program. They may go back for more instruction depending on what levels they're at. But the goal from the U.S. Department of Education is that once the student is in the bottom right corner and they are ready to exit, based on the new standards, that they are now ready to exit and succeed at a higher level, not only at the high school equivalency area, but in a college or workforce career work area or a college placement in the post-secondary area. So it's not only just to exit and go take a high school equivalency test, it's to exit and be successful and to succeed at a high level, whether it's high school equivalency, post-secondary, or career and workforce program. Related to the changes of TABE are the types of questions that are used on TABE 11 and 12, and we see these types of changes happening in high school equivalency at the higher levels, and now we'll see them trickle down to our beginning adult literacy programs. With TABE 11 and 12, the first blue column, the abbreviation is EBSR, and that's short for evidence-based selected response. The evidence-based selected response questions are only on the reading portion of the test, and we see that the reading, we have a few of them at level E, but quite a few of them at level A. So they get introduced at the lower levels of TABE, but then get really used at the higher levels, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. Evidence-based selected response are two-part reading questions. 2 parts also means that there's 2 points possible. Having 2 points possible on a question also changes the scoring system for TABE 11 and 12. No longer is it 1 question, 1 point. Now certain questions will have 2 points. And just as an example, on level E of TABE, 3 questions have 2 points. On level A of TABE, 15 questions have 2 points. So there are more points possible on level A of TABE than there is level E. The middle column is the technology enhanced items. If you're using TABE Online, these are the drag and drop, the matching questions, fill in the blank questions. So we'll see those, some examples of those as we move on. We see a handful of those for math and reading. A little bit more of them are used on the language. Think about dragging words into sentences, sentences into paragraphs. So a little bit more of an opportunity to use the technology enhancement or enhanced questions in the language test. For the total number of questions, 40 questions on math, 40 questions on language, and 47 questions on the reading test. There are more reading standards in the college and career readiness standards to address, so there are more questions to address those standards. We also have more passages as the higher levels based on level E to M to D. So we see a few more passages to address those standards. I'm going to jump over real quick to our website, tabetest.com. And at tabetest.com, I'm going to point us towards our resource tab at the top. If you're not familiar with tabetest.com, I encourage you to go out there and look at the resource tab. Under the TABE 11 and 12 banner, there is a menu of available resources. There's a lot of different documents and resources that are posted. We have a chart that compares all approved NRS assessments side by side if you want to look at the chart and see how TABE compares to other assessments. We have a webinar series. Not only does if they do these webinars, we have webinars that we host once a month on a Thursday. These webinars are also recorded and posted to our website. We started this back in December, so we have webinars posted since December. One of them In December, we did best practices, and we repeated that a few times because we had quite a few people registered. But we did one in January on TABE Online. We did one in February on local scanning with our new scanning platform. In March, we did one on curriculum and instructional materials. And April, we did one on the standards and linking those to diagnostic reports and item development. I believe our next one here in May is going to be focused on Class E for our ESL students. If you're not receiving emails related to the webinars, there's a link at the bottom of the page to add your email to the mailing list so that you get invitations for the emails, but that's under the resource tab. I'm going to go open up our practice item tab at this point to show a couple of sample items. The first sample item that I want to show you under our sample tab, you'll notice that there is a list of links of sample questions that are available, and these are PDFs that you can print off. I'm going to open up the level M sample test, and I will make this a little bit bigger for everybody to see. The first question, it says, look at the expression 10 plus x divided by 2, and it asks to evaluate the expression for x equaling 4. So 10 plus 4 divided by 2, the answer is 12. This is a gridded response math question, not a multiple choice question. So it's a little bit higher depth of knowledge over a traditional selected response. Instead of being A, B, C, or D, the student would bubble in the 1 and the 2 on the grid. If you're scanning your answer sheet, the student can bubble in left or right justified, the 1 and the 2. The scanner will pick it up either place on the right or the left. If this was a TABE online question, this question would be a fill-in-the-blank question. So the student would type in the answer of 12. It would not be a grid response in the computer-based format. If I scroll all the way to the end of these sample questions, and again, these samples are PDFs, so you can print them out, there is an answer key available, so you can have the answer key for all the sample questions. I'm going to go back real quick to our main page of our samples and open up the reading level A of the sample test. Level A of sample items it starts out with an essay on buying local. This essay is 6 paragraphs long. The 6th paragraph is a 1-sentence paragraph, so it's a rather short one. But the first question, I'll blow it up a little bit, says, read the sentence from paragraph 4. Both wages and taxes contribute to the health and welfare of a community as a whole. And it asks you, which key idea does the sentence support? And it's a multiple choice question. It's a straightforward question for the students to answer. If I scroll down to question number 3, we will see that this is a new question. This is the evidence-based selected response. And under this question, it says, Part A, how does the author provide effective support for the main idea of the article? And it's a multiple choice question. But Part B asks, which detail from the article best supports the answer to Part A? So it's asking the student to provide the evidence to support the answer to Part A. 2 parts to the question worth 2 points. If the student gets Part A and Part B correct, they get the full 2 points. If they get Part A correct and Part B incorrect, they get 1 point. And getting Part A incorrect and Part B correct will get 0 points. You cannot get the evidence correct without getting the main idea correct on an evidence-based selected response question. We'll look at some more samples as we go forward. I'm going to show you very quickly here. I'm going to go through another sample question. Let me open this up here real quick. I closed it by accident. I apologize. So under the resource tab, I'm going to go back to those sample questions that I closed too quickly. And I'm going to open up the math level A. There's always a question about formulas, and I want to point out how TABE addresses formulas in the math test. And I'm going to scroll down to question number 5. Question number 5, I'll increase the font here. It says, at an aquarium, researchers are preparing a mixture of salt water. There's a desired ratio is 90 grams of salt per liter of water. And it asks, what's the ratio of ounces per gallon? So ounces per gallon, it will provide you the ratio of 1 ounce to grams and 1 gallon to liters, because that's not the measurement of that objective of that question. If the question requires a formula, or in this case a conversion, that is not the focus of, or the target objective of that question, it is provided in line with the question. So here, the conversion from ounces to gallons to grams and liters is provided within the question. I'll go back to level E, math, and show you an example of, on the other side of that. This first question says, look at the figure. What's the area of the figure? And the area of the figure is asking you to calculate the area, so it does not provide the formula for area, because that is the target of the objective, is to understand how to calculate area. So again, TABE, unlike high school equivalency tests, does not provide formula sheets, but it does provide the formula or conversions within the question when it is not the target area within that question. I'm going to jump back to our PowerPoint real quick, and we'll come back and show a few more samples as we continue. One of the other key areas of change for TABE 11 and 12 is the time for the test. And time for the test is changed in a few different ways. The biggest way is at the title of this slide. We have changed to allowable time versus required time that TABE 9 and 10 used. This, and you'll notice this slide says current, because this is what the current allowable times are. This chart is available at tabetest.com. For reading, there is part 1 and part 2. Each section for EMDNA is allowed 60 minutes per section of allowable time. In a moment, I'll show you the average times that are much less than the allowable times. Part 1 and part 2 do need to be completed to have a reading score, but they do not need to be completed back to back. They can have a break in between, and depending on your program, that break may be a few minutes, that break may be over lunch, that break might be Monday to Tuesday. If you're a smaller program and you only meet 1 day a week, you may only have time to do part 1 on Monday, and then you have to deliver part 2 on the next Monday. Again, looking at how TABE 11 and 12 has changed related to time will require you to look at how your program might have to adapt for some changes. It is likely that you cannot just stop with TABE 9 and 10 on a Friday afternoon and pick up with TABE 11 and 12 on a Monday morning without looking at the frameworks and understanding how the test is a little bit different. Most programs have been using 9 and 10 for 10 or 15 years and have been fairly set in a certain way of doing things. And TABE 11 and 12 is a little bit different in the framework. Same thing with math, part 1 and part 2. They do both need to be completed together to get a math score. What is different about part 1 and part 2 of math is that part 2 is always the calculator portion. So part 1 is non-calculator, part 2 is calculator. You'll notice that level E and level L of part do not have a part 2. So no calculator involved with part 2 for level E. Level M has a calculator. It's a standard 4-function calculator. If you're using TABE Online, it's built into the system. Level D and level A use the same calculator that's used for high school equivalency testing. As I mentioned, these are the current times that published on our website. These were updated in July of last year. We have continued to monitor these times and review the data. And as of last month, we've had over 1 million students take TABE tests, and we have the data from the averages for that to compare to the field testing. And we are getting ready to submit another round of changes to the U.S. Department of Ed related to our allowable time limits. This slide shows the updates that we're going to be proposing here in the next week or so. And we anticipate that these new changes will take effect on July 1st, just as they did last year when we released TABE 11 and 12 back in January of 2018. So instead of, I'm going to go back and forth a couple of times here. Today, part 1 and part 2 of reading is 60 minutes for a total of 120. We're proposing to lower that to 90 minutes, 45 and 45, because the average time for students is 75 to 80 minutes over the last year and a half. Same thing for language, going from 60 minutes down to 50 minutes, because the average time is 35 to 40 minutes for students. For math, the current time is 75 minutes of allowable time. We're looking to go, this chart says 60, it may end up at 65 minutes, just because of the way it breaks out between part 1 and part 2 with the calculator. The average time is between 40 and 45 minutes, but we have to wait for the research scientists to break this out for the calculator. But again, 60 to 65 minutes, with the average being 40 to 45 minutes. We are also going to reduce the locator. If you notice, the locator was 45, 25 for language, and then 30 for math, and then going from 30, 15, and 18 for math. What that totals up is that the average time for TABE 11 and 12 is very similar to the testing times from TABE 9 and 10 complete battery. Now, a lot of programs use the survey, so it still is a different change for them, but it is very similar to the programs that did use the complete battery assessment for TABE 9 and 10. Again, these times are under review. We will have more announcements through the next month or so as we get the word back from the Department of Ed that these are okay to release under the Octave approval for that. Some of the resources that are available for programs and teachers specifically, one of those resources are the blueprints that we publish on our website. This blueprint is of level A for math. Level A of math is made up of 5 domains of the College of Career Readiness. Those 5 domains are color-coded. This blueprint is 3 pages long. It's a 3-page PDF. I have the first page broken on 2 slides. If I go to the next slide, the yellow geometry section or gold geometry section is detailed a little bit deeper. The left-hand side has the standards and the domain numbering scheme. The middle section is what we'll focus on, and the middle section has the definition or the description of the sub-skills. And the first one says, no precise definition of angle, circle, perpendicular line, and parallel line. And that is a low emphasis for level A of TABE 11 and 12. And I'll compare that to the third one that says, use volume formulas for cylinders, pyramids, cones, and spheres to solve problems. And that's a high emphasis for level A. High emphasis meaning there's more questions on the test related to that description versus the top description. And the reason that is that knowing the precise definition is a beginning skill or intermediate skill, where using the formula is a targeted skill at the higher level of math. So this is a targeted skill for level A, where this is a review skill for level A, so lower emphasis. If you're a math teacher and looking at TABE 11 and 12, it's great to have all the blueprints side by side to see where these descriptions are being emphasized and then covered at the highest emphasis or at the medium or low emphasis. If I was to open up the level D blueprint, I would very likely see these same 2 descriptions, but with a different emphasis level, because knowing the definition becomes much more of a focus of level D, where using the formula might be a medium emphasis on level D.
Mike, before you get into the next slide, let's take a pause and go to the Q&A and the chat. There's some responses in there.
Sure, let me go ahead and look at those real quick. I will go ahead and look here. I think there's a question about could we get a more detailed item analysis for a specific skill tested? And I will address that here in a moment when we look at some of the updates to the report, so we'll come back to that one. There is a question about some of our tech colleges are using Wonderlic in lieu of TABE for registration. I think they might be using the Wonderlic test of basic skills. I don't know if that's correct. If that person that typed that might want to reply to that. That's different than the Wonderlic GAIN test. If it's the Wonderlic test of basic skills, that might be because it is approved for ability to benefit. And we are in the process of applying for ability to benefit for TABE. We are in the very beginning process of that. We just found the person or at the Department of Education that's responsible for that. It's been a long struggle to find the right person, and now that we have, we're in the process of going through the ability to benefit approval process. So I will have more updates as that goes along. But if it is the Wonderlic Basic Skills Test, it is a older assessment that's not aligned to college and career readiness that is being used for that. So I think that would be the key difference for that. There's a question related to, we've had students at NRS level 3 in math pass the GED, implying that TABE 11-12 is more difficult. What feedback or guidance do you suggest in that response? And I think anecdotally, I think we have heard something similar to that. I don't know if I've heard NRS level 3 as much as NRS level 4, high 4, low 5. And I think that is an expectation. I think that, again, the Department of Education was looking at somebody to be successful versus pass. And so there's a distinction there between just passing and being successful, whether it's in a career workforce, a post-secondary program, or in a high school equivalency exam. And certainly the descriptors that we just reviewed earlier are more rigorous than just looking at the standards. And as a point of reference, the high school equivalency tests are free to align to the standards at their discretion. So there is no national requirement for high school equivalency like there is the NRS for accountability. So if you ask the U.S. Department of Education, there is a very strong likelihood that accountability tests, partly because they're covering a larger span, 0 through 12th grade, may have more rigorous requirements. Question about accommodations. I will say that for TABE 11 and 12, there is no change in the accommodation process. So the accommodation processes you used for TABE 9 and 10 would still be the accommodation processes you use for 11 and 12. The documentation that's required by Department of Ed is the same that you would use for 9 and 10 or 11 and 12. The only change, and we'll look at that a little bit more as we go forward, is that TABE 11 and 12 inside our TABE Online program does now support text-to-speech, and I'll show that to you in a moment as we go forward. A question that says, isn't TABE level E the lowest? And that is incorrect. Level L is our literacy level. We've had level L available, I think, at least back to the 7 and 8 days. It goes level L, E, M, D, and A. So that is that. And then there's a question related to which formulas are students expected to know? And that's a good question, and it's a recent question that's been posed to us. And I do actually have our content team putting together a formula reference sheet, not a formula sheet to use during testing, but a reference sheet for teachers to understand what formulas are used for TABE. And so we will have that released shortly on the website under the resource tab. And I'll come back to, I think those are all the questions that I see right now. And I'll come back again to the item analysis one as we move a little bit forward.
And Mike, there's one in the chat.
Oh, one in the chat. All right, let me check that out. And again, more of a question about the formula sheet and knowing the formula. And again, I think there is it comes down to what the NRS descriptor is asking for versus what the standard is looking for. And so why TABE does not use a formula sheet within the test. It is something that I've posed to our research scientists if there's any changes allowed. And right now, TABE was not field tested with a formula sheet. And so we have those formulas are in line when they are not part of the measurement of the specific target part of that objective. If that changes, we certainly can keep you updated, but right now, as I mentioned, there will be a formula reference sheet that we'll have for teachers available shortly on our website for that. So jumping back to the presentation and leaving off where we did with the blueprints, I'm going to jump back to our back to the PowerPoint. I'm sorry, back to our website and show you those blueprints a little bit more in depth. Again, under the resource tab, under TABE 11 and 12, there is a link for TABE 11 and 12 blueprints. And I will open up that blueprint that we were just looking at in the PowerPoint, but I'll open it up as a full PDF. So that was TABE Math Level L, which happens to be this one. So here's that same pie chart that we saw, 5 sections, and I'll just slowly drag through there. The first color is the gold geometry. Numbers and quantity is a smaller domain. Algebra is kind of a bigger domain, but we see quite a few low emphasis, a few medium emphasis areas, and a couple high emphasis. If we go into the gray color, that's functions, and again, some more medium, some more high, and a couple low emphasis areas. And then the last one is statistics and probability, and mainly medium and low in that statistics and probability. So again, having this blueprint, we'll reference this blueprint when we start to look at the diagnostic reports in a moment, but this blueprint comes in handy to know where those are for your teachers. We also share these blueprints with our publishing partners so that they can align their curriculum to the same objective areas that TABE 11 and 12 is measuring to. From here, I'm going to jump over and open up a few of our sample questions in the TABE Online environment. Not every program uses TABE Online, but I just want to show you what different questions look like inside TABE Online just to see what a computer-based question looks like. Again, I'm under the resource tab, but this time I'm going to scroll down to where it says Online Tools Training. The Online Tools Training is our way to say it's a tutorial for the computer-based testing. Within this page, there's some information about using the tutorial. This is a public site, so you can share this page with your students. I know there are programs that email out this link that's at the bottom to their students if they have advanced registration. They tell students you're going to be taking an assessment on the computer when you get here. If you want to get familiar with it, go ahead and do this tutorial. Other programs use this tutorial as a free computer literacy day within their adult ed program to get students used to using the computer mouse and keyboard for taking assessments. On the screen right now is our platform for testing within a computer. So this is our Insight testing platform. This is what a student would see when they're using the testing system. This link will take us right to the tutorial. If we were in the actual Insight system, it would also have a link right below it to log into the actual test and start a full TABE test. So we'll go ahead and click on our tutorial link. In the tutorial link, there's tutorials for TABE 9 and 10, as well as TABE 11 and 12. Inside the reading tutorial, there's EMD&A. And within level A, there's the standard tutorial or the text-to-speech audio tutorial. So if you want to see what text-to-speech looks like for an accommodation, you can do that in the public site. I will go ahead and do the standard tutorial. Again, students in a computer-based testing system differ from paper and pencil that they drive themselves through the testing process. They do not have the proctor leading them through the testing process. The first step of that is to log in and take the test. In the tutorial, we provide the login right above the login box. So I'll go ahead and type that in and go ahead and get started. It welcomes me into the test under my name that I've been registered, which is training student, and the location in the sample school. I can go ahead and click continue. It will give me a list of the tests that have been assigned to me. In this case, it's just the reading tutorial level A. I can click on that link. And now I begin to get directions on the test that I'm taking. Again, this is our tutorial, so I have directions based on the tutorial. and it will tell me a little bit about the help menu, how to move and navigate with the flag and the pointer. The next screen will help me navigate forward and backwards. And the final help screen will give me information about the highlighter and the sticky notes and the magnifying glass, and we'll show you those here in a second. And then the last screen is a technology screen that says, if you see 3 circles, your computer is operating correctly to deliver the test. Go ahead and click the green box to begin. From this point forward, you'll notice that this is the same essay that we saw earlier about buying local. I now can use a highlighter and highlight certain parts of the text if I want to. I can highlight different areas. I can turn that highlighter off if I need to. This is the first same sample question that we saw earlier. Read the sentence from paragraph 4. Both wages and taxes contribute to the health and welfare of the community as a whole, and I can select that answer. I'll go to the next question, and it says, which of these is most likely the author's purpose for writing the article, or writing this article? And I'll say A, but I want to flag that one for review. I can mark that one for review. I also want to make a little note for myself for future reference, so I can take a post-it note, and in this post-it note I want to say buying local seems good. So I just want to remember that just in case I have a question on that later. I'll go ahead to question number 3, but now I want to go back to question number 2. So let me go back, and I see the little post-it note is minimized, and I can double click on that and it will open that post-it note for me. If you like to use a straight edge for reading, you can open up the line guide, and then the line guide will allow you to click and drag line by line through there, so you have that ability to do that. You also have the ability to open up a magnifying glass to magnify that screen if you need to. Probably more applicable for a math question than a reading question. I'll go ahead to question number 3, as we remember that question number 3 was that gridded response. How does the author provide effective support for the main idea of the article? And I'll go with question A, or answer A, I'm sorry. Part B was which detail from the article best supports the answer to part A? Well, B must be the answer. Instead of going to question 4, I'm going to go to the number bar on the top left and jump ahead to question 6. Question 6 is also another evidence-based selected response with part A, but this time part B is also a technology-enabled question. So it asks which 2 details from the article best supports the answer to part A, and I'll select the first sentence and the third sentence. If I try to select a third sentence, it'll tell me that I've reached the maximum of 2. If this was the paper and pencil, if I was to go back to the PowerPoint or the PDF, 4 sentences are in this paragraph. Sentence 1 would be A, sentence 2 would be B, sentence 3 would be C, and sentence D would be D in a multiple choice setting. So we can turn a technology enhanced question into a multiple choice question for the paper. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to question 7 and leave that blank, and it'll take me to the review page. And notice, remember, I did mark question 2 with a flag to remind myself to look at that. I answered questions 1, 2, and 3. I skipped 4, 5, and 7. But if I want to jump back to question 2, all I have to do is click on that, and it takes me right back to 7, or it's question 2. And maybe I want to change my answer on that one. We also have an option eliminator or a cross-off tool, so I can cross off answers if I want to use some test-taking strategy that I might have been taught in class to eliminate known wrong answers. Again, maybe more applicable in a math scenario. I'm going to turn those off just to take away the big X's. We also have, as a modification, not an accommodation, the ability for the students to change the color. So they can change the background if they need to, similar to a color overlay in a paper and pencil world. They can also reverse the contrast. So now I change the color and the font at the same time. And another great use of the tutorial is let the students work through this to see what color is best for them, and they can set this at the start of the test for themselves. They can also change the contrast itself black and white and have it switched that way. The last one, if they want to hide any part of the screen, they can add a masking tool. So maybe I want to cover up everything and I don't want to see that top bar. I can cover that up with a masking tool, and I can unhide that if I need to.
Mike, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is the tutorial available on a disk for those serving in correction facilities that don't have internet access?
Not yet, but we are in the process of later this year having the Inside platform available in an offline environment, so it would be available then. We do have 2 versions of TABE online available. One is fully online and one is through a proxy server, so it can be in a limited bandwidth connection right now for corrections, depending on the setup. There are quite a few correctional facilities, more at a state level than a county level, that allow computer-based testing with an internet connection for that. Let me jump back to the webinar. So we talked about the Insight system, and that you can use that. Let me open this up in the full screen. Sorry about that. That you can use that with any operating system, Windows, Mac, Chrome, or Linux, or even iPad. It's available for iPads as well. We will be moving TABE Class C, our ESL test, also to Insight later this year, so that our ESL platform will be online as well. So reading, listening, speaking, and writing will be available through the computer-based platform at the end of this year for TABE Class C. For those programs not using computer-based testing, paper and pencil is still available as an option. We have changed the paper and pencil scoring to use a new web-based scoring system and scanning system. So in TABE 9 and 10, you used a Scantron scanner and our TestMate software. For TABE 11 and 12, you will use an image-based scanner and no software required. So for TABE 9 and 10, a Scantron scanner was typically $4,000 or $5,000, and Scantron would require an annual maintenance agreement that was sometimes around $1,000 a year. And our software itself was about $3,500 as a one-time fee. So it could have been about a $10,000 investment to scan answer sheets for TABE 9 and 10. We've done away with all those fees and now just use image-based scanners that you may already have an image-based scanner. The very first one on this list, the Epson 200, is a scanner that's available on Amazon or Staples.com for $199. And there's no additional fees for scanning. You just need to use a compatible scanner and use the TABE answer sheets for TABE 11 and 12 for scanning. A compatible scanner is any image scanner that is dual read, continuous feed, and Twain compliant. And this list is a few of them. There's a scanning document on our website that has a few more listed, but there are literally hundreds of scanners that will fit this criteria. Dual read means it reads both sides of the page as it goes through. Continuous feed means that it has a feeder and it's not a flatbed scanner. And Twain compliant means that it connects to the internet directly. When I plug my scanner that I carry around with me into my laptop that's connected to the internet, it connects directly to my portal. And when I scan something, it directly goes into the portal account. There's no attaching of a file. There's no scanning as a PDF. So that's the Twain technology that scans directly into a location. The important piece about the new scanning technology is that we're scanning directly into the same database used by TABE Online. So all of the data is now going to be stored in the same place. And I'll talk about why that's important in a few slides from now, because we are getting ready to start integrating with state data systems from that perspective. Whether you scan with the new scanning system or use TABE Online, all of the reports are available through either device, either the scanning or TABE Online. Only when you hand score do you not have access to the actual reports. You do still have the individual diagnostic profiles that you can hand write out, but they are a little bit more labor intensive due to the 2-point questions and understanding the scoring for TABE 11 and 12 if you are hand scoring. I would seriously recommend, if you were hand scoring TABE 9 and 10, that you look at one of the scanning options going forward, because the labor time just to spend on hand scoring 11 and 12 will probably far outreach the price of the scanner used for TABE 11 and 12. The different reports that are available to you are the individual profile and the portfolio. The profile is certainly the more popular report, the more often used report, and we'll look at a sample of that here in a moment. The difference between a profile and a portfolio is a summary over time. So if a student is with you for testing in January, then in July, and then in October, the portfolio report would show you a summary of all 3 of those occurrences. The profile report would show you the details of one of those occurrences. So more often you're using the profile report and working with a counselor or a teacher to detail that profile report. If you want to look at the results of the locator, you can run the locator report. As I mentioned earlier, because of all the data being together from the scanning or TABE Online, we now have the ability to export the data out to state-level database systems in a bulk export. So we're doing that in a few states right now, and going to be expanding that a little bit more this summer. We also have the ability to have a roster report. This is a newer report that's about 2 months old now, that you can look at a group of students together that may have tested together in TABE Online during the same session, and you wanted to see a summary. Very similar to a portfolio, but now this is a group of students, not one student. So it's a roster of students in a report. So you're getting summary data, not detailed data. You as a local program can export out to Excel any of your federally reportable data. So you have that option as well to export out to Excel. And I'll review a couple of updates that are happening to our diagnostic reports here as we move forward. The report on the screen is a mock-up of a sample report. The mock-up is, I will encourage you not to pay attention to the purple colors. We had our marketing team do this mock-up, and they got a little excited with the new colors, and so they were trying to make it look different. These colors have not been adopted, so the text is all the same as you're used to already. It's just the colors are different right now, but they have not been officially adopted yet. So this is still a student up at the top, Mike Johnson. He had an ID number that was used during registration of 4900. He was registered in the Minnesota program in the TABE sample school. In the middle, we see that he took reading, math, and language on 3 different days on the January 11th and 12th. On reading, he took level A of TABE. There was 56 total points available on the test, and this student obtained 40 of those points. Those 40 points turned into a scale score of 602, and that scale score equates out to an NRS level of 5. So again, those are the reportable numbers for the tracking system. If I look at the bottom of the report, the left-hand side of the bottom is the blueprint that we saw earlier. Key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas. That's the blueprint for level A of reading. There were 3 parts of the pie if we were to open up that blueprint. Within key ideas and details, there were 18 questions related to that domain. The red box is a new area that was just added last week in a phase 1 update. So this, and I don't have the points added in here, but we can imagine that a few of these questions, let's say 3 of those questions were 2-point questions. So out of 18 items, there was 21 total possible points. And I may have earned 15 points. So now I have a little bit more detail on my performance within key ideas and details. On the proficiencies out to the right, we measure proficiency in a different way from 9 and 10. We use item response theory algorithms to measure the weight of every question. So no longer do we just look, did you get a majority of those questions right? And if you did, you're partially proficient. We now look at what is the statistical value of each question. Some questions are statistically a little easier than others. Did you get some harder questions correct and some easier questions incorrect? That will affect your proficiency proficiency ranking. Again, the red box was added last week, so if you're running new reports this week, you'll see the points possible and points earned on your new reports. The second page of this report is our detailed view, and it includes a phase 2 update that's in the works. The left-hand side, again, is key ideas in detail, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and idea, the 3 domains from our blueprint. In the right-hand side, under the skill category, this is where the report ends today, that we tell you what skills go into level A of TABE. Drawing inferences, summarizing, describe relationship between events, and also identify main idea and support main idea. These are all skills within level A of TABE. What it doesn't do today, and I know this is part of the question that was asked earlier, is that it doesn't say, are these Mike Johnson's skills? And they're not. They're TABE level A skills today. Later this summer, and I don't have the exact date, but I will say by the end of summer at the latest, phase 2 will launch and it will add this red box. This red box will now make page 2 of this report a specific report for Mike Johnson's skills. So now my skills are the skills that I have, and the needs improvement are the areas that I need improvement on. So we will have more detailed diagnostics on page 2 and page 3 of the diagnostic profile report. Page 2 is always reading and math. Page 3 is the language test if you deliver the language test, so it fits onto page 3. So again, the red box on this page is part of our phase 3 update, and will be added a little bit later this summer coming up. We will have the exact date as soon as I have it from our development team. There is a phase 3. Phase 3 is the launching of a whole new interactive reporting portal for programs to have access to. That will allow you to go into the portal and aggregate out or disaggregate out students by different categories. So maybe you want to find all students that were at level M that need help on supporting main ideas, and you'll be able to aggregate or disaggregate that out and make that a new group if you need to. So it'll be an interactive reporting system that allows you to drill down deeper in phase 3. Phase 3 is planned for near the end of the year, beginning of the calendar year next year. I don't have the exact date yet because that's still in the development phase. But phase 2 is this summer. Phase 1 was just released about a week or so ago. So the updates are happening and are beginning to roll out for that area. I know we're up against the clock, so I'm going to move forward real quick and get some questions answered. I mentioned this a few times. We announced at COABE a partnership with Literacy Pro. This doesn't affect Florida directly, except to say that Literacy Pro is a data system that 18 states use as their state tracking system. What it does is it now allows us to start working with states like Florida and other states that have their own proprietary data systems and start sharing data with them overnight. Starting July 1st, all the states that use the LACIS data system will no longer hand enter data into their data system. So we are certainly going to start working with other states, in Florida, certainly a key state for that. We are doing a college placement study. I've talked about this during the first round of questions to correlate TABE to the AccuPlacer and the ACT test. We've had the requests from many state community college systems, Kentucky, Louisiana, Alabama, Wisconsin, Illinois, Hawaii, to have an updated correlation. There is an old correlation available if you do a Google search. So we're in the process of updating that correlation. We're also in the process of doing a high school equivalency correlation to all 3 high school equivalency exams. It does say level A here. It'll probably be level D in level A. Part of this correlation is at the request of states like New York that are looking to use TABE as an alternative pathway for reading and math. So you get a certain score on reading and math of TABE. You don't have to take those sections of high school equivalency tests. New York is looking at, because they have a similar pathway with their Regents exams. So they want to do that with TABE as well in some other states. Louisiana has a pathway like that. Wisconsin has a pathway. So states are asking for an updated correlation for that, and we're working on that data. This high school equivalency study will be available sooner than the college one, but we're working on both of them as well for this early this fall. I talked about the webinars, so you can sign up for the webinars. The resources that are available at tabetest.com. I will leave my name and number here if you need to get in touch with me. I'll review some of the questions and I'll turn it back to June to wrap up. So real quick, we talked about the item analysis question. Is there a time before the clock begins when a tester can change the settings as you described? And I think yes, I will double check that, but I think they can change that right when they start. And I will double check if the clock was running at that time, so I have to double check that. What are the cost factors for the question sheets, and is there a fee for the processing of the images? So there is no fee for scanning. The only requirement is that you use the TABE answer sheets, and on the TABE website at tabetest.com, the order forms are posted there that have the TABE answer sheets listed there. For those of us that hand score, is there a PDF of the profiles or portfolios they can provide? Yes, they're called the individual diagnostic profiles, and they are listed on the order forms as well. Can the roster report reflect the actual teacher-student roster, not the testing group? At this point, it is just the testing group. When I talked about that phase 3 and having that interactive reporting, we should be able to create our own groups and our own rosters from that point. So it is a requirement on a list on our wish list for the phase 3 reports for that as well. Why did the name of the domains change? What exactly is craft and structure? That changed because college and career readiness standards changed. Those are the naming conventions from the college and career readiness standards for that. There's a question, we're in the public schools, we use TABE tests for determining non-standard diploma applicants eligible a minimum of 10th grade. Good question about 10th grade level. There is a chart at tabetest.com, and I'll jump over there real quick just to show you, if I can get there real quick. At tabetest.com, under the resource tab, under TABE 11 and 12, there is a document that is called scale scores and grade ranges. If you want to convert your TABE scale score into a grade range, we do provide a crosswalk table for reading, math, and language on this chart. It's not on the report because it's not a scientifically valid score from the research perspective any longer because of the way grade levels have changed. What was a 10th grade as measured by TABE 9 and 10 is no longer a 10th grade under college and career readiness, so it no longer means the same thing. I'm looking at the math chart right now. If your math requirement used to be a 9th grade math requirement, that was as measured 15 to 18 years ago under TABE 9 and 10, not under today's math, not under the math that you took in high school that may have been even longer ago than that. I showed you a couple sample questions doing area on level E. I could have showed you doing algebra on level M, doing algebra on level D, and doing algebra on level A of TABE. So if most people would consider algebra a 9th grade math skill, but it's covered from 3rd grade to 12th grade on TABE because that's how the standards cover it in the college and career readiness standards. So it's important to understand and review the content and to update that. We are working on some correlations for that as well. I think, June, I don't know if you want me to turn it over to you and we can respond to the rest of these questions.
You know what, Mike? It's okay if we go a little over because it's such important information.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
If you're okay with that,
can you
just provide some more responses to us?
Sure. So we answered we covered the 10th grade one that, I think there needs to be some more detail in that. If I print a report in the fall and the test from May 19 before the summer changes, how will it print? It is supposed to print the new way, so you'll get the new information on the report. That's the way it's expected to happen. I will let you know if there's any changes to that. That similar question was asked again. Please explain phase 3 interactive reporting again. I don't have a lot of details because it's still in the development stages, just to know that it will be more of an interactive reporting portal that you will apply more filters to filter students in or out. So it's a little bit different than just selecting a report to run. You will set criteria and be able to pull up a group based on that criteria. You know, I don't want to say this is how it's going to happen, but if you're shopping for a car, you know, online, you can shop for a red car, you can shop for an SUV, you can sort by all those different criteria. And so something similar to that is how it's going. You know, again, think of the car as now the standards. I want to sort by key ideas and details. I want to sort by other standards potentially. Show me everybody above or below a certain scale score. That could be a very broad description as well. Have you had any schools state that since it's taking so long for the students to pass the test, that's affecting their funding? I haven't heard that it's affecting their funding, and I'm not sure what passing the test, you know, there's not a passing score, maybe reaching a cut score to be eligible for something. That might be something that is being mentioned there. But it is certainly a more rigorous test for programs, so there may be students that need more instructional time in certain areas, depending on what those students, where they're coming from. Some students are more familiar with the new standards if they've been in the K-12 system a little bit sooner than other students that have been out of the system longer. Based on what we see with TABE scores and the student's ability to pass the GED, even with lower than recommended scores, will they change the suggested GED range ready students? I think that maybe is more of a Florida DOE question to address at a later point for that one. And can I comment on the availability of textbooks for TABE 11 and 12?
Don't answer that. That's like, you know.
Yeah, I won't answer that. I will do two things. One is that we did have a webinar, and I did ask all the major publishers to submit a slide. So if you want to scroll through the webinars, that it was recorded. All the publishers that replied did have their slide displayed, so their answers, not my answers, are on those slides on what they have available. So almost all of them submitted a slide. There is also a lot of free resources available for TABE 11 and 12 through some not-for-profit groups that are also covered in the webinar. Can we get a transcript of the questions? I assume so. I think IPDA will do that. Can the portfolio report be sorted for a specific time frame? The portfolio report, I think, has a date range, yes. So you can sort for all the tests within a certain calendar range for that. And then the last question I see in the Q&A, and I'll go over to the chat here in a minute, is why does it take so long for scores to populate for printing? It should take no longer than 15 minutes. That's our internal requirement. If you're seeing it take longer than 15 minutes for the PDF to be populated, I would let our support team know. If you have a more urgent need than 15 minutes, the export, the Excel file export, is populated immediately after a student is done. So if you do need just the score, not the diagnostics, if you need just the score, the Excel file export is available as soon as the student is done within the portal for that. And which webinar offers the resources? It's the webinar that's recorded that's called Curriculum, and let me just show that real quick. On our tabetest.com website, the webinar for curriculum is listed as Curriculum and Instruction for TABE 11 and 12. It was the March 21st webinar.
Well, Mike, I think we could be here all day answering questions. So we want your questions. So go ahead and send your questions on to us, and we will get the responses back to you. But at this time, I think that we better just go on to the feedback slide. You're going to see 3 questions appear on your screen right now. If you could just take the opportunity to answer those, we really value your feedback. And while you're doing that, I just want to really thank you so much, Mike, for providing this great webinar for us. We, the Department of Education, IPDAY, and all of us in the field of adult education appreciate your expertise on this. I hope you can join us on our next webinar, which is scheduled for May 22nd. It's collaborative problem solving in the ESL classroom. So the feedback slide will now go away. And until next time, thank you again, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.